Okay, right. We're going to start, everybody. Very, very pleased to welcome you to the inaugural Digital Twin Hub Fireside Chat. I'm Henry Fenby-Taylor, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel. We will be talking to two very special guests. The first of which is Paul Lamb, who is the Director of Corporate Development and Strategy at Too Simple. Hi, Paul. Good to see you. And the second special guest is Mark Coates, the International Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at Bentley Systems. Good to see you as well. And they are both members of the Digital Twin Hub Strategic Board. So that's an extra special bonus that we've got for them there. Good to see you both. Excellent. Okay, well, let's get started. So today is a little bit more relaxed than your average conversation about digital twins, which I hope they'll still get heated. But I'd like to start with asking you both, what benefit do you feel that digital twins are bringing today? And how are we seeing digital twins emerging as a force for good in the world? I'm going to let Mark choose that. No, Mark's offering it to Paul.
Come on, Paul.
All right, and I'll just start. Hello, everyone. So I think three parts to my answers. First one, there will be a lot of value creation opportunities and cost efficiency opportunities by using digital twins. Let's start with the value creations. There are disruptive ones, there are progressive ones. So the disruptive ones, obviously, it will allow us to have the digital twinning and being able to adopt new business models. I just moved from Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to Too Simple, which is an autonomous driving company. Now, with autonomous driving, you will need a simulation of roads so that you can test autonomy without having the trucks or the vehicles on road when they are not ready, right? Simple as that. You cannot have a half-done autonomy vehicle out there in the road testing. So digital twin is almost the most important simulation infrastructure for autonomous vehicle in the future. So, however, not many people talk about autonomous vehicle in the context of digital twin. Yet, digital twin is the necessary factors for autonomous vehicle to happen. So that's one example of how disruptive digital twin can be, but not necessarily obvious. There are also progressive changes in value creations that you can use digital twin to enable predictive maintenance. You would enable a lot of wind farms operator not having to fly in engineers from Germany all the way to Taiwan, which is one of the largest offshore wind farm located in. And that saves a lot of carbon footprint and allow much more timely predictive maintenance or remote maintenance. And that has been shown essential over the last couple of years when we had a COVID instance. So those are the two perspectives. And I think they are very important. And digital twin can create a lot of values for businesses and also cost efficiencies. And these are also not necessarily all disruptive that I just mentioned, but also progressive. And the reason I mentioned that is we don't need to necessarily fall into the misimpression that every technology is disruptive that require an industry change. Digital twin may sound like so if you think about it in the cases of industrial metaverse. So I'm trying to caution here, also using the right meaning of the words, not create unnecessary panic about a disruptive change of the whole ecosystem, but to embrace the value add.
Excellent, Paul. That was really interesting and beautifully succinct. I think that that divergence of innovation towards disruption or enhancing existing approaches is so key, because it could be one or the other, but very often we're managing better with data, and we're making better decisions by connecting our data and our systems together. Mark, I wonder what you think the future holds for connecting the world together through data.
Yeah, I think just bolting on to Paul's comments there, and if we're going to stick with the financial aspect, it's the insight, that disruptive insight. You know, we're going to be asked to do very much more with if not the same, less. You know, the cost of materials is rising, and therefore that decision process needs to be a lot cleaner, a lot stronger, and have a greater foresight. And if we're going to go down any particular rabbit hole, mobility, you know, the fact of mobility, the carbon reduction aspect as well, getting people off out of the cars, whether it be an electric car or whether it be a fossil fuel car, is great for the environment. You know, cleaner air, brake dust, road wear, everything like that comes very much to the forefront, and getting people onto public transport of sorts. And therefore, we need to make that decision on where the investment is required, what is required, what will be the returns on it. And this is where a digital twin, a connected twin, a system of systems, those many layers of data that can be provided by multiple sources will help not only financial markets, but hopefully governments and clients make correct decisions on those investments that become worthwhile and mostly, hopefully, essential decisions that give us a greater impact on our social communities.
Yeah, definitely. It's fairly clear to me that the future of decision making, it requires greater accuracy and transparency about what's really happening. And I think it's really interesting to see how digital twins are crossing boundaries, barriers internationally, because I think they tell a great story. I think that's one of the key aspects of digital twins for me, is that it's fairly easy to tell somebody what a digital twin is. So everyone always wants to know, and it always has to be asked, what is a digital twin? I hope that it's not an awkward question, but it is a question that comes up a lot. And I think I'm going to ask this to Paul, because you were talking earlier about it's important that we agree on what we're talking about. And so therefore, what is a digital twin?
Well, I'll do it from a business perspective, the easier version. To me, digital twin is a replica, one-to-one replica of everything happening in the realities in the digital world. And there should be three functions or definitions of it. One is a representation of the information. So we can have a digital twin, one-to-one, replicating everything happening in the real world. And then we will be able to represent it in the digital world. So it's a perfect twinning. The second layer is a behavioral twinning. So we're also twinning almost like in a mirror. If I'm raising my right hand, hopefully you'll be raising the left hand in the mirror. But yeah, it should be the replica of the behavior. And then the third level, I think this is a little bit where divergence of consensus happen. Would the twinning be able to feed back and to be able to impact the realities? So that's the feedback mechanisms. So to me, if we can have a digital twin replicating information and replicating behaviors such to enable simulation, and finally, if we can have this online and offline interactions, then to me, that will be a digital twin.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thomas jumped in before you'd finished and said a digital twin is not a clone, and you caught that by saying, it's about, there's that feedback aspect as well. So excellent. Mark, I don't think you can top that.
No, the bit I would say is actually really interesting in Paul's comment there about that sort of the interaction. How you think how our own personal lives have changed over the last 3 years, with what's gone on in the world. The data is a representation of the here and now. It's that insight and foresight of the interaction that is really going to be insightful coming forward.
Fantastic. Well, we've had an excellent, I was going to say comment, but we've had an excellent talk in the chat from Dennis O'Keefe, Hi, Dennis. Long time no see. About the ability for digital twins to impact hospitals and clinicians. And I hope that that's certainly a topic that we can address in the future. But we are a third of the way through today's conversation. So let's move on to the topic at hand. Finances, financial digital twins. Really, the bottom line is the bottom line to so many people. And digital twins can exist across multiple domains. I wonder where the line is in both of your current thinking between having a digital twin for managing the finances versus the financial benefits of digital twins. Whoever looks at me the most attentively can talk. This is a fireside chat. I didn't bring my fireside, but
if I can start on that, I mean, Paul is far better placed than I am to discuss the finance side, and I don't want to enter into that. I think the financial implications and the ramifications of having a twin that is started at the beginning of any mindset. I mean, that what jumps to mind is that paper, Henry. Paul was one of the interview candidates that we did when we pulled it together. You know, we interviewed about 35 financial organizations, international, and it was their mindset around, you know, a credit interview, looking at the digital roadmap of the asset, and the client being able to provide that. And that was more from a transactional point of view. You know, being able to invest easier, being able to get out of the investment far easier. That is its own value in itself, you know, because that attracts money to our environment, and therefore the more money in the environment, the more work, and that circle continues to grow, and the pie continues to grow, to use that phrase. So going back to your question, the value of a digital twin with a financial flair or financial mindset will create enormous amounts of rewards for our industry by actually making the industry far more viable to invest in.
Excellent. Paul, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Mark. The way that I'll put it is, you've got a couple of layers of things. So you put it candidly, Henry, that there is a financial value of digital twin itself, right? That's the financial benefits. And these benefits are primarily on better information flow so that financiers can better assess and evaluate an infrastructure project. So currently we pay a lot of money to auditors, vendors, due diligence, trying to make sense of what a road is worth. That to me, no offense at all, is a little bit redundant, because in the end of the day, a road asset or a power asset should be the cleanest and the most single-use and easiest asset to evaluate than a business. Imagining a technology business or imagining a cross-border e-commerce business, right? With a lot of intangibles. Like, how can it be the tangible assets becoming more complicated than an intangible asset to value? Now, a lot of reasons for that. And one of the reasons for that is because it's tangible assets, we didn't have a good habit of keeping good record. So if I have a road built 10, 15 years ago, if I'm trying to privatize it, it would take me a lot of pain to collect those data. They might be on papers, they may be on somewhere else. So the transaction costs of transacting an infrastructure assets is just so steer, so high, that it just bars a lot of investors from going into it. So that goes to my second point, which is digital twin is a financial infrastructure for the infrastructure asset class. So if we're thinking about the meme stocks or all the other stuff, which is another extreme of having too much liquidity in the asset class, but that's a good segue into thinking, why is it that we cannot transact on an infrastructure project at a retail level, right? If I were in UK, I would love to invest into critical infrastructure that affects my life, like from high-speed rail 2 or to the bridges, to the Tideway Tunnel and all the stuff like that. But currently, only institutional investors have the ability to invest in them, right? But if we try to think about it, goes back to the transaction costs, that if we can have a Bloomberg, if we can have a Reuters or FactSet equivalent for infrastructure as a class, that we will be able to see in the screen that how these financial assets infrastructures are working, then we will be able to democratize the financing of infrastructure. Then wouldn't it be a better way than pay more taxes and then having the government as an agent or to channel those financing into the infrastructure than having some of these infrastructures in the public space? Of course, this would need a lot of studies about its value, but I'm just putting out there that one is the financial value of digital twin itself, and the other one is the utility perspective of digital twin as a financial infrastructure for infrastructure as an asset class.
I think it's a really interesting point. I'm thinking about the water utility sector in the UK that is the only privatized sector in the world delivering drinking water and taking away sewage and treating that. You know, there have been problems of late, certainly when the last year when the temperatures got very hot and there were extreme conditions, etc. But the way that they are measured and managed by government, because obviously there is a performance requirement, is still an important aspect of that, requires a certain amount of data collection and a certain amount of insight into the performance of those assets as a class across the country. And I feel like at the moment, the way that those things are measured and managed, it's very complex. And there's a certain amount of simplification that is necessary to make the insights tangible to people. And I wonder if that's the future. Where is the line, do you both think, between complete raw transparency about this is exactly how everything is going versus useful, actionable insights into that performance? Because I think that's often one of the key measures, thinking back to meme stocks that I have personally had a little bit of fun with myself. The only real measure, the only information I can take in is what is the price doing, what has the price done, and what's happening in the news. Whereas infrastructure and how it's used and how it's financed and how it could be financed in the future, I love the idea of investing. I'd buy into that for sure. I wonder how that would look. How do we create those valuable insights? Easy question, difficult question. See Mark reaching for the mute button.
As I say, it really depends on each requirement. I'm not going to say it's going to be an individual requirement, but each requirement will be an industry requirement, depending whether you're working in the financial sector, whether you're working in the asset management sector. And I think this is where we have to be very careful on not the amount of data we collect, but the amount of data we report on, because it's very similar when no doubt we've all been there, and by about slide 35 of a PowerPoint presentation, you've lost the will to live. It's all just because we can saturate. So I think it doesn't really give you an answer to your question, but I think what I would say is we've got to be very mindful of how we represent the data we collect. I noticed one of the questions is that, how do we incentivize companies to openly share data without monopolizing or making profit from it? I think it goes back to that comment of the greater good. That data and that sharing of data, whether it be mobility data on the motorways or mobility data on railway lines or water, from when we've had issues of the drought. Again, it's what's the use of the data, why is it being used, and who is going to use it need to be the key questions. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I think there should definitely be a boundary from being useful, right? A 1-to-1 ratio map is equally useless, right? Because I will need to put something on my hands so that to navigate. So some sort of representation and some sort of streamlining of data is not only important from a privacy and cybersecurity perspective, but it's also making the digital twin more consumable and useful. So there would, I certainly agree with what Mark just said, that there needs to be a boundary. Secondly, I think it will be industry specific. There will be some sectors where we would probably ask for a little bit more data, typically the underground assets, right? The digital twin will probably do more if I were an investor in a metro, in a tunnels, or in the water utilities, because I just cannot physically assess these assets. So having the digital twin in fuller details will be more crucial than having the digital twin of a road or a single asset, right? And the third one, I think there will also be different types of use. So I would imagine banks and asset managers who perform the quarterly or the monthly monitoring of the assets could have a bit of a fuller picture of the digital twin representing the physical assets, because a lot of earlier warning signals, for example, lack of traffic, a surge in power consumption supplies and stuff like that, can be a very powerful source of information for the investment and the financial decisions. And having access to those decisions will effectively reduce the risks or the perceived risks from the investors. And then it will trigger back a benefit of the reduction of cost of capital. It's the same idea of if you agree to put a watch monitoring yourself, your insurance premium will go down. Well, privacy is another issue, but that's the principle. So that's how I think about this question.
Oh, I think that's really interesting, having spoken to a number of insurers who are looking to get into digital twinning. It's clearly an area of concern that they still rely in many cases on site visits. And the same is true, of investment. You have to rely on the things that you hear in the boardroom, and that makes a lot of people very uncomfortable, because you're relying on numbers that you might not understand the provenance of. So having better provenance, creating that better data platform to ensure that these decisions are better made can really take things forward. Definitely agree with you on that. I wonder how, this is an easy one. I'm going to give you an easy one now. Risk management, that's a key part of any financial management regime, is managing the risk of that. Have you got any good examples or any good stories, anecdotal or otherwise, about how financial risks can be mitigated through digital twins?
I can certainly go first. When we're looking at wind farms and solar farms, having a digital twin obviously gives us the early warning signals, as I just mentioned. If you would be able to monitor all these real-time metrics, then you would have a fuller picture of not just the snapshot of the quarterly operating results that the operators give you, but you would also have a better understanding how these operating metrics are skewed and evolved over time. And normally, when an infrastructure asset fail or from a financial perspective become more risky, it would take a couple of quarterly results to reflect. And as you mentioned, until you do the site visits, you wouldn't be able to tell. So that's certainly one. I think in the power sectors, it's incredibly important. And then to have that, because you're managing typically a 10 years loan or a very long tenure investments. So if you don't have the digital twin, it's very hard to ensure the continuity of that knowledge, right? Suppose the person who invested in the assets changed jobs, right? 5 years later, then the knowledge is lost. But with the digital twin there, it's much easier for the portfolio officers or the credit officers who succeeded the job to continue monitoring the assets with the highest quality.
I mean, I won't go into too much detail about it, but I can actually give you it was in the paper that I spoke about earlier. Great Portland Estates borrowed a substantial amount of money from 4 banks. This is 3-4 years ago. It's well being reported in industry, and they were able to reduce their interest rate by 0.25% by achieving key goals, very much ESG focused, achieving those key goals, those key metrics. So that's the sticking carrot, maybe. That sort of, being able to give a financial reduction to a substantially large loan by actually using data as that de-risking and also proving of that goals had been achieved. So again, it's very generic, but again, that is now coming into the market more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. The if you look online, the Centre for Digital Built Britain finance white paper was written by Alexandra Bolton, our very own Mark Coates and Peter Alhage, and really gives you a good overview of the use cases there in the financial realm. So yeah, definitely recommend you take a look at that. I wonder if now we could take a moment to answer perhaps some of the questions. So speaking of financial benefits, incentive yes, we've discussed that one. And well, the question, the last one after that is the use case for digital twins limited to short response times and use of live/near live data? How can risks with longer term horizons be managed using digital twins? It's an excellent question there.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a quick one on that one. Data is continuous, like as I mentioned. The longer term risks are typically the aggregation of the path dependency and the involvement of the shorter term data. So having a digital twin will certainly help that. The other one is the idea of systematic risks in infrastructure sectors is missing. So imagine if you have the digital twin data of one asset, it becomes the benchmark for the others. So that will help us to establish that benchmark, and eventually we will have a better view of what a systematic risks look like for infrastructure as an asset class.
Yeah, just picking up on that and actually throwing in the top question about the vision of digital roads. Obviously, you've got that digital road, but it's actually, if you're thinking about the core asset, I don't know if people realise that I think it was last year, April, June, it became mandatory for vehicles, especially in Europe, to have these. I think that the simple term is like a black box. It's not a live black box, by the way. But should there be the vehicle should be involved in a crash, it can be interrogated by local police forces around very much speeding or erratic driving. It doesn't take that a great deal, and we have them here in the UK for the younger driver on their cars to reduce their insurance. Now, you start collecting that data, and of course, anonymizing it, and let's not go down the insurance route, but that sort of data then being available to decision making on Horizon 2, Horizon 3, of where do we improve public transport? Because remember, the aim, the goal, and the best result for carbon reduction is to get us out of those vehicles and get that cleaner air. So we can see there's a pattern forming of a number of people driving from a particular location to a bus terminus or a railway station or something. And we can provide driverless vehicles, those driverless buses that we were seeing so much more about. Again, that's a return on investment in very much with the hindsight of digital data from a twin.
Absolutely. Just to put a little bit more detail on that. So that that legislation has come through, and it is intended to only activate during a crash, and will record data for those stakeholders, including what accident avoidance systems were used. So it feels like that's proportionate.
Yes.
In terms of a legislation perspective, in terms of it, and an insurance perspective, in terms of people really, when do people really need to know? Do people really need to know this information? Well, if there is an accident, I think we can all agree that that is a public safety issue, and people do need to know if systems aren't working correctly, or is an example use case, so that there's that. We need that feedback loop into the system at multiple scales, from governance all the way down to, how the car works.
Yeah, and that sort of key data, that anonymity of it, and you could just do that monthly dump. How many people from went A to B? Not speed, time. It can be simple things like real low level data of time and numbers. Therefore, okay, do we need to put a metro, a light train in there? And again, that impacts the financial decision of investment as well. You're going to get a return if you invest in a tramway. There is going to be the right number of people who use it that will meet the financial model of payback within a certain period of time.
Yep. And if we're not sending people, for traffic to count traffic for a day, that is hugely wasteful of people's time, and that's more resources burnt sending somebody to a place to stand on a corner with a clipboard.
Well, that's the comment, is what day do you now pick to put those people there? Is it the Monday and Friday, or is it the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with the fact that so often now we're not following the traditional trends of going to the office?
Indeed. Yes, I think that's really impacted the working week, and there's been a number of places where I've gone to during those sorts of days and times. Going in on a Monday, it's good for the queue for the cafe. Let's put it that way. But there might be a little bit less on. Well, this has been really interesting, and we've had some interesting chats going on in the back of house, and you will now see that link to that finance paper is now available. So excellent paper. I read that the other day, Mark. Is there anything else in the pipeline?
Yeah, your timing is perfect, actually, because I got signed off this morning.
Nice.
I'm in North America to carry on with the follow-up paper. So I'll be looking for support and help from not only members of the board, but from the community as we dive into a second paper and look for particular areas that may have be a prevalence that people want covered as well. So please do feel free to reach out and engage.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Mark, and thanks for carrying on the good work. Thank you, Paul Lamb, very much for your insights today. Mark Coates, you've both been excellent. It's been an excellent time chatting to you both. Thank you, everybody who joined us today. I've been Henry Fenby-Taylor, and this has been the first Digital Twin Fireside Chat.
Thank you, everybody.